My name is Eleanor Vance, and on my 50th birthday, I experienced a betrayal so profound it shattered my world. The sweet scent of hydrangeas and the unlit candles on my homemade cake clashed with the deafening silence of my empty home. My house, a sanctuary for decades, transformed into a stark monument to my solitude. My husband, David, and our children, Sarah and Michael, for whom I had sacrificed countless dreams, were absent. They were celebrating someone else's happiness, while my spirit lay in irreparable pieces. My life, before that day, was a testament to unconditional familial devotion. My parents, Martha and Henry, instilled in me honesty, tireless effort, and the belief that true wealth lay in character and family bonds. My modest childhood was rich in love. My father, Henry, a carpenter, taught me the satisfaction of working with my hands. My mother, Martha, a seamstress, taught me the importance of care. These weren't just skills. They were life philosophies, shaping me into a woman who found purpose in nurturing and building. If you're drawn to stories like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. I met David Vance in my early 20s, a charming, ambitious man who complemented my nurturing nature. Our whirlwind romance culminated in a humble wedding. We envisioned a future intertwined, built on mutual admiration and shared dreams. We started our family with Sarah, then Michael, two vibrant spirits who became my world. I poured every ounce of my energy, creativity, and essence into raising them. I remembered staying up all night with a feverish Sarah, her tiny hand clutching mine, and the endless patience required to teach Michael to tie his shoelaces. My life was a symphony of endless tasks, managing the household, offering maternal counsel, and providing unwavering support for David's career and my children's burgeoning dreams. I worked diligently throughout my life, not in a glamorous career, but in roles that allowed me to contribute meaningfully to my family's well-being. I started as an administrative assistant in a bustling legal office, a job requiring meticulous attention to detail and innate organizational skill. Later, as my children grew more independent, I managed a quaint gift shop owned by a dear friend. This work provided a steady income and the flexibility to always be present for my family's most significant moments. The money I earned helped cover Sarah's piano lessons, Michael's advanced coding classes, and ensured the pantry was always stocked. My deepest joy stemmed from the certainty that I was actively contributing to their comfort, education, and future. I was the quiet anchor, the unwavering force that held everything together. While David pursued professional advancement, climbing the corporate ladder, and my children dedicated themselves to their studies, I was the compass, the safe harbor. Countless times I forewent a new dress, a long-dreamed-of vacation, or a personal hobby, choosing instead to invest in their happiness and security. My leisure often consisted of organizing the house, cooking elaborate meals, or, on rare quiet evenings, delving into a forgotten novel, always with a subtle guilt that I should be doing something more productive for my loved ones. Slowly, imperceptibly, I began to forget myself, my own desires and aspirations, convinced that a woman's true fulfillment lay in the happiness and success of her children and her partner. This self-abnegation, initially born of love and virtue, quietly morphed into an almost imperceptible invisibility within my own home, a diminishing of my own self in the reflection of others. My 50th birthday wasn't just another date on the calendar. It was meant to be a pivotal moment, marking half a century of life, a round number signifying a new chapter. I had envisioned a simple yet profoundly meaningful celebration, surrounded by the people who mattered most. I didn't crave extravagant gifts or a lavish party. My heart yearned for the warm presence of David, Sarah, and Michael. Perhaps a quiet dinner I prepared, a homemade cake, and the easy, loving conversations that filled our living room. I pictured their tight embraces, their loving glances, words of appreciation for everything I had done. It was a legitimate expectation, built upon a lifetime of unwavering devotion and countless sacrifices. This was my moment to finally feel seen, truly valued, deeply loved. It was to be the unspoken acknowledgement of a life passionately dedicated to them. What I couldn't possibly know was that this deeply held expectation would soon shatter into the most bitter of disappointments. August 15th, my 50th birthday, dawned with a shy sun. I woke early, a flutter of nervous excitement. 50 years. Half a century. I descended to the kitchen, preparing coffee, anticipating David's usual, "Happy birthday." But the kitchen remained silent. a silence that stretched throughout the house. David had already left for work without a note. Sarah and Michael, who had moved into their own apartments, hadn't called or sent a text. The first sharp pang of strangeness, of disquiet, made itself known. They must be busy, they'll call later, I reasoned, trying to push away the unsettling feeling. I continued preparing breakfast, but my enthusiasm had dimmed. Each empty cup highlighted the absence. The morning dragged on, my anticipation mingling with gnawing anxiety. At the gift shop, my colleagues greeted me with genuine warmth, showering me with small tokens and heartfelt wishes. I smiled, thanked them, but my thoughts kept drifting back home. Are they planning a surprise? A stubborn whisper of hope insisted. With every phone vibration my heart leapt, but they were only work-related calls or messages from friends. Nothing from David, Sarah, or Michael. At lunchtime I treated myself to a special meal at my favorite bistro. I sat alone, observing couples and families, a tight knot forming in my throat. The absence of my family on such an important day stung. I returned home in the late afternoon. The front door was exactly as I had left it, locked and undisturbed. No signs of a surprise party, no decorations, no balloons. The apartment was precisely as I had left it that morning. The silence felt heavier, more cutting. It's all right, I murmured to myself, my voice thick with unshed tears. I'll celebrate by myself. I chose my most beautiful dress, a deep sapphire blue. I applied light but careful makeup. I fastened the delicate pearl earrings David had given me for our 10th anniversary. I then retrieved the exquisite chocolate cake I had ordered, adorned with sugar flowers and tiny unlit candles. I set the dining room table with my finest linen, porcelain, and silver. I lit the centerpiece candles, arranged the fresh flowers. The sweet vanilla aroma of the cake and the perfume of the blossoms filled the air, yet the atmosphere remained frozen, oppressively heavy. The clock marched on, unforgiving. 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Still no calls, no messages, no knock at the door. The few messages that did trickle in from my children were vague, almost dismissive. Happy birthday, Mom. Catch up later, busy with something important. From Sarah. And hugs, Mom. We'll call you tomorrow, can't make it tonight. From Michael. David sent nothing at all. My expectation completely evaporated, replaced by an acute physical pain in my chest. The tears I had desperately tried to hold back now streamed silently down my face, mingling with my meticulously applied makeup. I sat there, dressed for a party, the table set, the cake decorated, the candles burning, utterly, completely alone. What followed wasn't just profound sadness, but a deep, searing humiliation. My hands trembling, I picked up my phone and began scrolling through my social media feed. And it was there, on the cold screen, that the brutal cruelty of the situation revealed itself. Sarah had posted a photo. A vibrant, boisterous picture filled with smiling, embracing faces. In it, Sarah and Michael stood arm in arm, raising their glasses in a toast, with David right beside them, his smile wider and more genuine than I had seen in years. Sarah's caption read, "Celebrating Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark's 25th wedding anniversary. What an incredible party. Family reunited, so much joy and love." My world crumbled. My husband's sister, Carol, and her husband, Mark. Carol, who had always treated me with polite indifference. It was an anniversary I knew existed, but it had never superseded my own special day. This year, however, Carol's party had become the epicenter, the more important event, the one that justified the absence of everyone in my life. It wasn't a secret trip, nor a surprise party for someone else. It was a clear, deliberate choice. And they were all there. David, my children, all of them laughing, toasting, celebrating, while I, Eleanor Vance, spent my 50th birthday alone, in a house that suddenly felt alien and cold. The pain of this betrayal was unbearable. It wasn't merely physical abandonment. It was profound emotional abandonment, the crushing sensation of being utterly invisible, of not mattering enough to my own family. I felt like an antique piece of furniture, forgotten in a dusty corner, while life and joy unfolded vibrantly somewhere else. The photo, brimming with laughter and embraces, was a punch to the gut, a vivid, undeniable image of my own utter insignificance in their eyes. That moment wasn't just humiliation. It was a deep wound that tore at my soul, a betrayal that shook the very foundations of the trust and intimacy I had so meticulously built over decades. The birthday cake, once a symbol of joyous celebration, now appeared as a stark monument to my profound loneliness. The burning candles seemed to mock my naivety, casting long, dancing shadows that accentuated the emptiness of the room. I looked at the table set with so much hopeful care, at my beautiful dress, at my face, now swollen and streaked with tears. A cold, quiet rage began to intertwine with my overwhelming sorrow, a freezing fire that slowly replaced the initial despair. They didn't value me. They didn't see me. They didn't love me with the fierce, unconditional love I had always given them. The truth, raw and unvarnished, settled upon me with chilling clarity. The feeling of abandonment, of not being important to the people closest to me, can lead to a profound erosion of self-worth and a soul-crushing sense of undeservedness. I slowly walked back to the table, my hands trembling slightly, picked up a slice of the untouched cake, and without even lighting a single candle for myself, ate it amidst my silent tears, feeling the sweet flavor mingle with the bitter taste of my profound disappointment. Each forkful was an act of quiet defiance against the humiliation I had just endured. This was my birthday, and I would not allow their indifference to completely steal my dignity. But something had fundamentally shifted within me. The pain was not paralyzing me, it was transforming me. The deep sadness was giving way to a flicker of defiance, a silent, unyielding resolution that began to burn in my core. The Eleanor who wept there, cake in hand, knew that this night would not be an end, but the very beginning of something new. From this moment forward, I would refuse to be invisible. This was the definitive breaking point. The life I had known had irrevocably ended, and a new one was about to be forged from the ashes of my own profound humiliation. The slice of chocolate cake tasted like ash in my mouth, the sweetness a cruel mockery against the bitter reality that had just slammed into me. I swallowed past the lump in my throat, not because I was hungry, but because it felt like a silent, defiant act. This was my cake, my birthday, and I refused to let their callous indifference steal even this small, solitary pleasure. Each bite was a defiant whisper against the overwhelming silence of the room, a promise that this moment, this profound humiliation, would not break me. It would instead forge something new within me. The tears continued to fall, hot and relentless, blurring the festive decorations I had so meticulously arranged. My beautiful sapphire dress, chosen with such hope, felt like a costume for a play no one bothered to attend. I stood in the middle of my living room, the flickering candles on the untouched cake casting long dancing shadows that seemed to mock my solitude. 50 years. 50 years of giving, of nurturing, of putting everyone else first. And for what? For a casual dismissal, a forgotten date, a public slap in the face delivered via a cheerful social media post. The initial shock began to recede, leaving behind a raw, exposed nerve of pain. But something else was stirring in its wake. A cold, hard anger, unfamiliar yet strangely invigorating. It wasn't the volatile, explosive anger that shouts and throws things, but a deep, simmering fury, quiet and resolute, like molten iron beginning to cool and solidify. It was the anger of a woman who had been taken for granted, whose sacrifices had been not just unappreciated but utterly invisible. I walked over to the dining table, my steps deliberate, and without a second thought, I extinguished each candle on the chocolate cake. The wisps of smoke curled upwards, carrying away the last vestiges of my shattered expectations. Then, with a slow, purposeful movement, I began to clear the table. The fine china, the polished silver, the linen tablecloth, each item carefully put away, not with sadness but with a growing sense of detachment. This wasn't just cleaning up after a non-event. It was dismantling a stage where I had been set up to perform, only to find myself the sole, humiliated actress. As I put the last plate into the dishwasher, a profound clarity washed over me. It was as if a heavy fog, one I hadn't even realized I was living under, had finally lifted, revealing a landscape I had ignored for too long. They didn't value me. Not truly. Not in the way I valued them. My existence in their lives had become a given, a constant, predictable presence that required no acknowledgement, no effort on their part. I was the reliable backdrop against which their vibrant, self-centered lives unfolded. And I had allowed it. I had cultivated it, even believing that my unwavering support was a testament to my love, when in reality, it had merely fostered their complacency. That night, lying in my bed, the silence of the house no longer oppressive but strangely empowering, I finally understood. My pain wasn't just about a missed birthday. It was about a lifetime of subtle erosions, of small betrayals accumulating into a gaping wound. It was about every time I'd bitten my tongue to keep the peace, every personal desire I'd suppressed for the sake of family harmony, every dream I'd deferred because their needs seemed more urgent, more deserving. I remembered postponing that pottery class I always wanted to take, saying, maybe next year, when Sarah needed extra tutoring for her SATs. I recalled canceling a weekend retreat with an old college friend because Michael had a last-minute school project that only Mom could help with. And David? His important business dinners often coincided with our own anniversaries, or special moments I had hoped to share. Each instance, a tiny thread pulled from the tapestry of my own life, rewoven into theirs, until my own pattern became faint, almost invisible. The memory of my mother, Martha, returned to me with surprising vividness. She had always told me, Eleanor, honey, a woman needs her own strong foundation. Love is beautiful, but it can't be your entire house. You need rooms for yourself too. I had dismissed it then, brimming with youthful idealism and the boundless energy of new motherhood. I thought love was enough. I thought my devotion would naturally inspire theirs. How wrong I had been. My parents, who had lived a life of honest work and unwavering integrity, would have been appalled by David's and my children's actions. They taught me dignity and self-respect, lessons I had apparently forgotten in my fervent pursuit of being the perfect wife and mother. A fierce, protective instinct, not for them but for myself, began to ignite within me. The old Eleanor, the one who sought their approval, who bent over backward to accommodate, who swallowed her hurt with a polite smile, was gone. She had died 1,000 small deaths, but her final breath was taken on my 50th birthday. In her place, a new woman was beginning to emerge, hardened by betrayal but clear-eyed and resolute. I wouldn't be invisible anymore. I wouldn't be the silent backdrop. My story from now on would be written by me for me. My first conscious decision, made in the quiet solitude of that early morning, was simple yet revolutionary. I would stop begging for a place at their table. If they chose to be absent from my life, I would reciprocate, not with anger or bitterness, but with a profound, liberating detachment. I would focus my energy, my time, my love, on those who genuinely valued it, and crucially on myself. This wasn't about revenge in the petty sense, not yet. This was about self-preservation, about reclaiming the Eleanor Vance who had been lost somewhere amidst the laundry piles, the school events, and David's demanding schedule. The next morning, a subtle shift in my routine began. Usually I'd prepare David's coffee, lay out his clothes, and pack his lunch with meticulous care. Today I simply made my own cup, savoring the warmth against my hands, and sat at the kitchen counter, reading the newspaper. When David finally came down, looking slightly disheveled and clearly in a rush, he blinked at the empty spot where his coffee usually waited. "Eleanor? My coffee?" he asked, a hint of irritation in his voice. His eyes, usually clouded with the concerns of his work, seemed surprised by my presence, or rather by my lack of immediate action for him. I looked up from my paper, a calm, almost serene expression on my face. "Oh, good morning, David," I said, my voice even. "I only made one cup today. I thought you might be able to make your own. I'm trying to savor my mornings a little more." He stared at me, his brow furrowed, clearly taken aback. He mumbled something about being too busy and having an important meeting, but for the first time in decades I didn't rush to placate him. I simply watched him fumble with the coffee maker, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor of satisfaction stirring within me. It was a small step, inconsequential to anyone else, but for me it was a declaration of independence. Later that day at work, my friend and colleague Brenda noticed the difference. Brenda was a vibrant, no-nonsense woman, a few years older than me, with a laugh that could fill a room and an uncanny ability to read people. She'd been a steady presence in my life, always there for a chat or a sympathetic ear, even if I hadn't always reciprocated with the same openness. "Eleanor, you seem different today," she observed, sipping her tea during our lunch break. Her gaze was sharp, perceptive, more peaceful somehow, but also like you've seen a ghost. I managed a wry smile. "Something like that, Brenda. You could say I finally saw myself." I didn't elaborate, not yet. The wounds were too fresh, the anger too new to articulate fully. But Brenda, with her intuitive wisdom, simply nodded, understanding that something profound had shifted. She didn't press, offering instead a quiet camaraderie that felt like a lifeline. My next step was to reassess my finances. For years, all household income had been managed by David, who claimed he had a better grasp of investments and budgeting. I had always trusted him implicitly, content to handle the daily expenses and ensure the bills were paid. But the cold, hard truth of his absence on my birthday sparked a deep-seated distrust. If he could so easily disregard me, what else had he been overlooking? What else had I allowed myself to be blind to? I spent several evenings after work, discreetly, poring over old bank statements and utility bills. It was tedious work, a maze of numbers and transactions that felt foreign to me. I had always handled the gift shop's books with ease, but our personal finances, David's domain, were far more complex. There were accounts I didn't fully understand, investments mentioned in passing but never fully explained. The more I delved, the more I realized how utterly dependent I had become on David's financial management, a dependency that now felt like a cage. This was no longer just about personal hurt. It was about reclaiming my autonomy, my future. I began making discreet calls. First, to a financial advisor I vaguely knew through a distant relative, a kind woman named Charlotte Davies. I arranged a confidential meeting. I explained in vague terms that I was reviewing my family's financial arrangements. Charlotte listened patiently, her expression unreadable, but her questions were precise and insightful. She quickly identified several areas where my understanding was minimal and where I had virtually no independent access or control. The picture she painted was sobering. While I had a joint account for household expenses, a significant portion of our assets, including David's investments and his retirement funds, were solely in his name or managed in ways that made me feel utterly disconnected. It was legal, perhaps, but it felt deeply unequal, a stark reminder of my silent secondary role. "Eleanor," Charlotte said gently, her voice firm but compassionate, "it's crucial for every woman to have her own financial independence, a secure nest egg that is solely hers. Things happen. Lives change. And you need to be prepared." Her words resonated deeply within me, echoing the nascent resolve that had taken root on my birthday. I thanked her, promising to follow up, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about money. It was about security, about having the resources to build a new life, if that's what it came to. My children, Sarah and Michael, continued their distant communication. Sarah would text me a quick, "How are you, Mom?" every few days, devoid of real warmth or genuine interest. Michael would call, usually with a request or a complaint, never a true conversation. I found myself responding with polite brevity, no longer chasing their affection, no longer initiating contact with the desperation I once felt. It hurt, yes, a dull ache that lingered, but it was a necessary hurt, a severing of unhealthy cords. For years I had poured into them, expecting, perhaps subconsciously, a reciprocal flow of devotion. But their river flowed in other directions, towards their own lives, their own desires, leaving me parched. The revelation on my birthday was that their loyalty, their presence, was conditional, easily diverted by a more important event. I remembered a conversation with Michael a few months prior, when he had mentioned needing a substantial loan for a new business venture. I had, of course, offered to help, willing to dip into the small savings I had diligently built from my gift shop earnings, my pottery class fund, as I used to secretly call it. David had quickly interjected, saying he would handle it through his investments. I had trusted him then, relieved that Michael's dream would be supported. Now a cold suspicion began to prickle. Had David actually given Michael the money? Or had he simply used the opportunity to reinforce his own indispensable role, perhaps even subtly undermining my own offer of help? The layers of their complacency, their easy disregard, were beginning to peel back, revealing a much deeper pattern of manipulation and subtle control. The feeling of wanting to understand, to see the whole picture, became a quiet obsession. It wasn't about immediate confrontation, but about gathering facts, about building my own knowledge base, a shield against future blind spots. I started researching small business loans, even looking into the type of venture Michael was pursuing, trying to understand what kind of financial assistance he truly needed and how it might have been structured. I wanted to be informed, empowered, no longer operating in the dark. I also began to reconnect with aspects of myself that had long been dormant. I dusted off my old pottery wheel in the garage, a gift from David years ago that had rarely seen use. The clay felt cool and pliable in my hands, a soothing, tactile experience that grounded me, pulling me out of the swirling chaos of my emotions. I found a local community pottery studio, signed up for evening classes, and for the first time in years, felt a spark of pure, unadulterated joy that had nothing to do with anyone else's happiness. It was mine. The gentle rhythm of the wheel, the focused concentration, the sheer pleasure of creating something with my own hands, filled a void I hadn't even realized was there. In the studio I met other women, some retired, some simply seeking a creative outlet. They were kind, supportive, and their conversations were refreshing, devoid of the social maneuvering and veiled judgments I had come to associate with my in-laws' circle or even David's work colleagues. I found myself laughing more genuinely, freely. These new connections, born of shared interest and authentic warmth, were a stark contrast to the hollow relationships I had cultivated out of duty and expectation. I realized how starved I had been for genuine connection, for friendships that didn't demand anything from me other than my authentic self. My transformation was quiet, internal, but profound. It wasn't about grand gestures or immediate announcements. It was about rebuilding myself brick by painstaking brick from the ground up. It was about solidifying my own foundation, creating the rooms for myself that my mother had spoken of. I was learning to walk away from a lifetime of self-neglect, stepping into a space where my own needs, my own desires, were not just acknowledged but actively pursued. The pain of my 50th birthday was still a fresh wound, but it was also a powerful catalyst, igniting a fire of self-discovery and an unwavering resolve to craft a life of integrity, dignity, and true joy, a life that, ironically, might just be the most potent form of retribution against those who had dismissed me. I was no longer waiting for them. I was moving forward, creating a path they might one day regret not having walked alongside me. This was only the beginning. The grand ballroom of the Omni Hotel, where the annual Vance Family Legacy Gala was held, shimmered with a dazzling display of wealth and carefully curated prestige. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto polished marble floors, reflecting the opulent gowns and tailored tuxedos of the city's elite. The air hummed with polite chatter, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the soft strains of a live jazz band. David, impeccable in his tuxedo, greeted everyone with his practiced, charming smile, the perfect host, utterly confident in his dominion. He was a master of this stage, and tonight, he believed, was another triumph. I walked beside him, my black gown a quiet statement amidst the flashier ensembles, my grandmother's pearls a cool weight against my throat. I felt a strange blend of detachment and heightened awareness. Every smile directed at David, every effusive compliment on his philanthropic spirit or shrewd business acumen, felt like a fresh layer of irony. He introduced me to various dignitaries, his hand briefly touching my back, a fleeting gesture of ownership that felt utterly hollow. I smiled, nodded, made pleasant small talk, my internal world a maelstrom of anticipation masked by an unnerving calm. My hands, clasped discreetly in front of me, were steady. Brenda, my colleague from the gift shop, was there, invited as a local business partner David occasionally acknowledged. Our eyes met across the crowded room. She offered a small, knowing smile, a silent acknowledgement of the strength she sensed in me. Charlotte Davies, my financial advisor, also caught my eye from a table near the stage, her gaze sharp and discreetly encouraging. They were my silent allies, witnesses to the truth I was about to unleash. As the evening progressed, David took the stage, the spotlight finding him effortlessly. He beamed, a picture of success and integrity, ready to deliver his annual address. The massive projector screen behind him, usually reserved for glossy images of his company's achievements and charitable donations, glowed a soft blue, awaiting his presentation. My heart thrummed a steady beat, not of fear but of profound, unwavering resolve. This was it. He began his speech with practiced ease, his voice resonating through the ballroom. He spoke of the Vance legacy of unwavering ethics and the sacred trust he held for his community and his family. He even offered a brief, dismissive mention of me, his wife, Eleanor, my rock, my unwavering support, a line so rehearsed and devoid of genuine feeling it made my skin crawl. The hypocrisy was a suffocating cloak over the glittering room. As he moved to the part of his speech where he would unveil the year's financial highlights and philanthropic efforts, He signaled for the first slide to appear on the screen. His assistant, a young man named Tom, stood ready at the control panel. This was my moment. I had meticulously planned this. Days ago, I had arranged a tech consultation with Tom, feigning concern about a potential glitch during David's presentation. Under the guise of wanting to ensure everything runs smoothly for David's big night, I had subtly installed a tiny, almost invisible USB drive into the hidden port of the main projector system, connecting it via a small wireless remote I now held concealed in my palm. It contained the meticulously compiled dossier from Charlotte, bank statements, offshore account details, the transfer records to Maria Rodriguez and Rossi, and the damning photo of David and Maria. And now, David boomed, his voice swelling with pride, let me present the undeniable evidence of our commitment to transparency and our profound financial health. He gestured grandly towards the screen. Tom pressed a button. Instead of the corporate logo David expected, the colossal screen behind him flashed, then was filled with the stark, undeniable image of a meticulously detailed bank statement. It wasn't a Vance Holdings corporate account. It was a personal offshore account, displaying a dizzying sequence of large, illicit transfers. Gasps, soft at first, began to ripple through the room. David froze, his confident smile dissolving into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. His eyes, wide and disbelieving, darted from the screen to me, then back to the glaring figures. He stammered, No, that's not right. Tom, what is this? Change the slide. His voice was suddenly thin, laced with panic, a stark contrast to his earlier bravado. But I wasn't done. With a single, almost imperceptible press of the remote in my hand, the screen flickered and a new image appeared. A clear, undeniable record of a substantial transfer, specifically earmarked as personal loan repayment to Maria Rodriguez, followed by the recurring smaller payments to Rossi at her mother's address. The room erupted into a fresh wave of gasps and whispers, a collective intake of breath. Then the final, most devastating image, the candid photograph of David and Maria, far too close, far too intimate, against the picturesque backdrop of a European city, clearly taken on one of his business trips. The photo was uncaptioned, unnecessary. Its message was loud, clear, and utterly damning. The ballroom plunged into a stunned, deafening silence, a vacuum where laughter and polite conversation had just been. All eyes, moments ago fixed on David on stage, now swiveled to me, Eleanor Vance, the invisible wife. David remained frozen, his face ash-white, his mouth agape, a man utterly stripped bare, exposed. His unwavering ethics and sacred trust were shattered into a million irreparable pieces, projected larger than life for all to see. His world had just spectacularly imploded, and I, the woman he had dismissed, was the architect of its downfall. The quiet, collective gasp that rippled through the room was almost more powerful than any shout. Faces, moments before composed and smiling, now twisted into expressions of shock, disbelief, and a morbid fascination. I saw a prominent city councilman drop his champagne flute, the delicate crystal shattering with a sharp tink against the marble, a sound that pierced the suffocating silence. A well-known socialite, usually meticulously poised, clapped a trembling hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror and, I suspected, a hint of something more salacious. The collective gasp swelled into a low, agitated murmur, a buzzing hive of whispers. David's sister Carol, who had suggested I not attend, was at a table near the front. Her face, usually pinched with disdain, was now a ghastly shade of green. She stared at the screen, then at David, then at me, her carefully constructed world fracturing before her very eyes. Her husband, Mark, beside her, looked utterly shell-shocked, his jaw slack. The important guests, the pillars of the community David had so desperately sought to impress, now looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust, their carefully cultivated respect turning to contempt. On the screen, the image of David and Maria, smiling intimately, remained a brutal, undeniable testament to his betrayal. It was too public, too visceral to deny. The financial documents, clear and stark, painted a picture of calculated deceit, not just a momentary lapse. The narrative I had prepared in my mind, the quiet monologue of facts, was entirely unnecessary. The images spoke for themselves, louder and more powerfully than any words I could utter. Then a voice broke through the din, sharp and accusatory. Fraud? And Maria Rodriguez? I always knew he was too good to be true. The murmur erupted into a cacophony of exclamations. Tax evasion. Diversion of charity funds. His own business partner's mother's address. The names and accusations flew, each one a nail hammered into David's coffin of public reputation. People began pulling out their phones not for pictures, but to discreetly text to share the breaking scandal. The social media world, which had brought me my initial humiliation, was now poised to tear David's empire apart. My eyes found Sarah and Michael seated at a table closer to the back. Sarah was pale, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes darting between the screen and me, then to her father. Michael, usually so self-assured, looked utterly bewildered, his face a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. They had benefited from their father's generosity, from his connections, never questioning the source. Now the rotten foundation beneath their perceived success was being laid bare. I felt a pang not of regret, but of a sad confirmation of their willful blindness, their complicity in David's constructed reality. David, finally finding his voice, though it was a mere croak, tried to move to regain control. He stumbled towards Tom, the assistant, attempting to snatch the remote, to force the screen blank. But Tom, clearly unnerved by the unfolding disaster, backed away, shaking his head. David looked like a desperate, cornered animal, stripped of all his power and pretense. The man who had boasted of his integrity now stood exposed as a fraud and a philanderer. I remained rooted to my spot, my gaze unwavering. There was no triumph in my heart, only a profound, exhausting sense of justice. This wasn't about feeling superior. It was about reclaiming the truth, about shattering the illusions that had held me captive for so long. The cold anger was still there, but it was now tempered with a quiet clarity. I had chosen truth over silence, dignity over subservience. Suddenly a hand reached for mine. It was Brenda, her grip firm and warm. "Eleanor," she whispered, her eyes shining with admiration and a fierce loyalty, "you did it. You finally did it." Her presence, a small act of solidarity amidst the chaos, meant more than any formal commendation. David, after a futile attempt to silence the screen, turned to me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and pure, unadulterated fear. "Eleanor, what have you done? What have you done?" His voice was hoarse, raw, stripped of all its former confidence. I met his gaze directly, unflinching. "I've simply shown them the truth, David," I said, my voice steady, carrying over the growing din, "the truth you so meticulously hid. The truth about your unwavering ethics, about your legacy, and about the kind of man you truly are." My words were calm, precise, each one landing with devastating accuracy. He lunged forward, not towards me but towards the screen again, a pathetic, desperate attempt to erase the evidence. But it was too late. The images were seared into the minds of everyone present. The whispered conversations were turning into open, outraged discussions. People began to stand to leave their tables, some hurrying out, others gathering in small, shocked groups, their faces animated with the thrill of scandal. Sarah and Michael, their faces etched with confusion and a dawning realization of the magnitude of their father's disgrace, remained seated, looking utterly lost. I felt no satisfaction in their pain, only a quiet acknowledgement that they too were now forced to confront the truth of their family, a truth they had comfortably ignored. Their silence, their distance from me on my birthday, now seemed less like casual neglect and more like a premonition of this inevitable unraveling. I turned away from David, from the chaotic scene on stage, from the crumbling edifice of his life. My purpose was served. The truth had been spoken, or rather displayed, for all to see. I held my head high, my grandmother's pearls a testament to a different kind of legacy, a legacy of quiet strength and enduring dignity. As I began to walk towards the exit, the noise of the ballroom faded behind me, replaced by the resolute beat of my own heart, finally free. The night air, crisp and cool, felt like a cleansing breath, a promise of a future where I would no longer be invisible, no longer silenced, no longer just a pawn in someone else's carefully constructed lie. This was the end of their charade and the true beginning of my own authentic life. The night outside was a crisp, clear autumn canvas, dotted with countless stars that seemed to twinkle with a newfound intensity, reflecting a vast, indifferent universe that cared little for human deceit. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, a raw, honest scent that was a welcome change from the cloying perfumes and roasted meats inside the ballroom. I didn't wait for David, didn't look back. I simply walked. My feet, though aching from standing, felt lighter than they had in years. The heavy cloak of invisibility and subservience had been shed, replaced by an intoxicating sense of liberation. I got into my own car, the one I had insisted on buying with my gift shop earnings, a small but sturdy SUV. David had scoffed at its practicality, but tonight, it represented my independence. As I drove away, leaving the now infamous Omni Hotel behind, I knew my life would never be the same. The scandal would erupt, consuming David's carefully constructed empire. The news channels would buzz, the papers would run sensational headlines. His Vance legacy would be tarnished beyond repair. Maria Rodriguez's name would be whispered in every corner of the city. And Sarah and Michael would be forced to grapple with the shocking reality of their father's deceit, and their own complicity, however unwitting. For me, it was a profound turning point. The quiet strength I had found in my pottery studio, the unwavering support from Brenda and Charlotte, the lessons from my parents, they had all culminated in this moment. I had stood up for myself, for truth, for dignity. It wasn't about vengeance in the petty sense. It was about reclaiming my self-worth, about forging a path built on authenticity. In the turbulent weeks and months that followed, the consequences for David were swift and devastating. His business, Vance Holdings, once lauded for its integrity, crumbled under the weight of criminal investigations into tax fraud and money laundering. Accounts were frozen, assets seized, and multiple lawsuits mounted against him. His public image, once his most prized possession, shattered, leaving him a pariah in the very circles he had so desperately sought to impress. Maria Rodriguez disappeared from public life, likely taking David's illicit funds with her, a final, ironic twist to his betrayal. My children, Sarah and Michael, faced their own difficult reckoning. The financial support from their father vanished, and they were forced to confront the true corrupt source of their easy lives. Sarah had to give up her expensive city apartment, and Michael's business venture collapsed without David's hidden backing. It was painful for them, a harsh awakening, but one that I hoped would ultimately lead them to a more honest understanding of life and value. I did not cut them off entirely, but our relationship was reset, rebuilt on new terms where genuine effort and respect were paramount, not expectation or entitlement. My divorce from David was messy, protracted, but ultimately liberating. Thanks to Charlotte's meticulous work, I secured a fair settlement, enough to ensure my financial independence for the rest of my life. I sold the large empty house that had become a monument to my loneliness, and bought a smaller, cozier place with a beautiful garden and a dedicated studio for my pottery. It was a home filled with genuine warmth, heartfelt laughter from new friends, and an authenticity that David's grand mansion could never possess. I continued my pottery, finding immense joy and fulfillment in shaping clay with my own hands, creating beauty from raw materials. I traveled, something I'd always dreamed of but postponed, exploring new places and rediscovering the world through my own eyes. I built new friendships, deeper, more meaningful connections with people who valued me for who I was, not who I was married to. I learned that my true worth didn't depend on anyone's recognition, but on my own integrity and courage. My 50th birthday was a day of profound sadness, but it was also the day I found my voice, the day I chose myself. It was the day I stopped being invisible and began living a life truly my own. It wasn't a quiet ending, but a thunderous and undeniable beginning. Have you ever experienced betrayal or humiliation? How did you regain your dignity and move forward? Your story might inspire others. Share it in the comments. And join us. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring and true stories like this one and give us a like. See you next time and thank you.